What's up, San Diego? Good morning to all of you. A little bit of a gloomy morning here in America's finest city. Not necessarily gloomy in terms of the Padres after yesterday's victory. Padres needed to get one win against Atlanta and really feel good about themselves going into the All-Star break. They did that. Now it's time to go after and get a couple more against Atlanta and have to go against the big-time Chris Sale today for the Padres. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show. Thanks again for tuning in to the broadcast. We are live streaming on YouTube and Twitch, as well as Facebook and my Instagram account. Apparently, they changed the rules on X. You have to be a premium member to stream on X now, so no more video streaming on X, apparently. But we are here. We are live. We are local. We're talking some Padres baseball with you. Got a lot to break down today on the show. We're going to talk Padres baseball, of course. We're going to talk about the first half, for Major League Baseball in general, kind of give you a little preview of the All-Star break. I don't know how much I'm going to dive into the draft today. The draft does take place later on this afternoon. To me, a lot of those draft picks end up getting used for other entities like trade deadline pickups. We'll talk about whether or not the Padres should be all in at the trade deadline, what that kind of means in general. Plus, we got a big day tomorrow. My productivity as a coach, productivity as a broadcaster, just as a citizen of the United States goes way down because the release of College Football 25 comes out tomorrow for all of those that pre-ordered. I'm going to get a quick preview of the game, as well as some teams that you should probably have to start your dynasty. Well, we'll get into that later on in the show. Do want to talk about the San Diego Padres last night. Big win for the Pods as they're able to beat the Atlanta Braves and their pitcher, who had been a great pitcher in Major League Baseball this year. Came in with a 7-3 record and a 1.88 ERA in his 17 games started. Hadn't allowed any. He only allowed 4 hits with runners in scoring position all season, and yesterday the Padres got 3 of them. Added 3 of their own to Ronaldo Lopez. I mean, the Padres were able to beat Ronaldo Lopez yesterday and secure the season series over the Atlanta Braves. And a quick peek at the standings. Padres 1 game out of a wild card spot after the tough week that they have had, but right there in striking distance, obviously, for the second half of the season, or the ceremonial second half of the season. San Diego Padres this year have already played 98 games. They'll have 99 under their belts at the end of today. And to play almost 100 games before the All-Star break is kind of ridiculous, but that's just where we're at right now with the Padres having to go play in Korea to start the season. But if they can finish a couple of games above 500, 3 games above 500 in the ceremonial first half, get a rest and recovery, and be ready for the second half, we'll see what the Padres have in store. Got a lot of reports from Bob Nightingale over the weekend on a lot of different things. He went in on the draft a little bit, but then when he goes around the bases and talks about what's going on and what he's hearing throughout Major League Baseball, he goes on to talk about a couple of things that involve the San Diego Padres, one of them being the Padres have recently made an offer for Chicago White Sox ace Garrett Crochet, but it was quickly dismissed. That's something we're going to dive into. The other thing that he mentions was about general manager A.J. Preller, as well as Blue Jays general manager Ross Atkins and Giants president of baseball operation Farhan Zaidi. Baseball executives are starting to believe, this is from Bob Nightingale in his latest story on USA Today, baseball executives are starting to believe that Blue Jays general manager Ross Atkins, Padres general manager A.J. Preller, and Farhan Zaidi, the Giants president of baseball operations, all may have to make the playoffs to assure they keep their jobs. Atkins appears to be in the most danger. That's a very interesting comment or report made by Bob Nightingale. Obviously, I think that's not really anything too crazy when it comes to the San Diego Padres going into the season. I think a lot of people thought that A.J. Preller would need to have a good season to maintain his job based on how long it has been, based on new faces at the top of ownership, based on kind of the patience that the Padres fans and their front office have had with A.J. Preller. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that he'd have to have a good year this year in order to keep his job. Padres so far this year, 2 games above 500, trying to make that 3 after almost 100 games played. Again, they will play game 100 after the All-Star break against the Cleveland Guardians as they start their Comic-Con road trip after the All-Star break. And this Padres team right now, I mean, I think they are good enough to be a playoff team. I don't necessarily know if they are good enough to be a team that runs through the postseason. And we'll see what type of additions need to be made at the All-Star break. To me, I mean, with that kind of pressure, I think Padres fans need to brace themselves for the possibility of A.J. Preller being all in at the trade deadline. But what is all in at the trade deadline for a team like the San Diego Padres? I don't believe being all in is trading every one of your 30 prospects. I also don't believe that being all in is trading a guy like Ethan Salas or Leotis DeVries. I don't think that's being all in. But if you start picking away at some of your top 30 prospects, I would consider that being all in if you could go and find the right deal. There's a lot of things that need to be added to the San Diego Padres roster. Some of them, I think, are a little bit more of a premium than others, and we're going to get into the first half grades of the San Diego Padres later on. But there are some areas where the Padres need to improve. I think most importantly, it's starting pitching, just because of the fact that they are limping their way right now through the season with 2 of their starters out and not knowing a timetable for return. I think their bullpen needs a lot of help. I think their bullpen coming into the season was expected to be one of their major assets, and instead the bullpen has turned into probably one of their biggest weaknesses on this team. The back end's pretty good with Estrada and Suarez, but that's about it. Adrian Morejon, I think, has done a good job. He still tries to find a role in the bullpen. But you look at what the Padres have in terms of their roster construction, they got a lot of holes. And we talked about it during this kind of week of sadness, if you will, but this week of disappointing play after winning 12 of 14, all of the problems that the Padres have had came back to the surface. With the bullpen not being able to hang on to the lead, with the starting pitching being on their last leg, with their offense at times where the bottom half of the order and some of the weak spots continue to be a problem. I think the addition of Xander Bogaerts back in the lineup is great. I think that's going to hopefully pay dividends. Padres are going to have to lean a lot on Xander Bogaerts in terms of their offense. I think getting Fernando Tatis Jr. back is a major thing. And who knows when that's going to be the case, but it sounds like he has gotten good news as of late. And picking up a guy like him is like making another addition at the trade deadline. I think from a catching perspective, you have a couple of holes there too, but that's a position that you don't necessarily, that's not a position you can actively upgrade in Major League Baseball. It's very hard to do. And I think that's why it's so important and so imperative to make it through this trade deadline and probably the next couple of trade deadlines with keeping Ethan Salas. And Ethan Salas yesterday played in the Futures game, which was cool to see for the young up-and-coming player for the San Diego Padres. It's under 20 years old and a future of not only the Padres, but of Major League Baseball. He's done a good job being in the San Diego Padres organization. I mean, he has been thrown to the wolves by playing incredibly up when it comes to where he's supposed to be at, especially at his age. But he is a unicorn. And there's not a lot of unicorns out there to acquire if you're a Major League Baseball team. Catchers are kind of like quarterbacks. Catchers in Major League Baseball that can throw people out, catch pitchers defensively, and be good hitters are unicorns. And you start thinking about some of the players that are those unicorns. You start looking at some of the catchers that are those unicorns. They're all on really good baseball teams right now. They're all on teams that are contenders. They're all on teams that lead their division. They're all on teams that are in the wild card hunt. And those are all players that are not available ever at the trade deadline. Start thinking about some of those unicorns. I know we don't like Will Smith here in San Diego, but Will Smith is one of those unicorns. Dodgers are in first place. JT Realmuto is one of those unicorns. I know he's hurt right now, but the Phillies, for the most of the season with having JT, they're in first place. They're the best team in Major League Baseball. The Milwaukee Brewers, their catcher's an all-star. And William Contreras. He is a unicorn. The Milwaukee Brewers are in first place. The Atlanta Braves have two catchers that are solid, and d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy. Guys that can catch, guys that can hit. Atlanta Braves are in a wild card spot. You go to the American League, you think of Adley Rutschman. Adley Rutschman and the Baltimore Orioles are one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. I mean, you could continue to go down the list, but some of these players that are the best catchers in Major League Baseball are on all the good teams. They're not going to be available. Kansas City Royals have one in Salvador Perez. They're a game out of a wild card spot. So it's imperative for the Padres, if they want to improve their catching situation, to keep Ethan Salas a part of their organization no matter what. That doesn't mean I don't think they should be all in. They should definitely be all in, but there's nobody available that justifies trading Ethan Salas for. I know a couple of people in the chat earlier this week said, oh, what about Skubal for they're not trading him. As of the latest report from Bob Nightingale, they're not going to trade Turek Skubal. He's not going to be traded. There's a lot of teams that need starting pitching help. And the Padres, as I mentioned earlier, have reportedly made an offer to the White Sox for ace Garrett Crochet, but it was quickly dismissed. They're obviously in the active negotiations of trying to find a deal that works for both teams. Padres don't want to give up Salas or DeVries, and I don't blame them. They shouldn't. And the White Sox think Garrett Crochet is their main asset to revamp their roster, but they got a lot of other players on that roster that they could trade for, that they could trade away as well if they really want to go all in for the rebuild. I think you have to look at every team and where they currently sit with their roster to determine if they're a buyer or a seller and understand how much leverage that those teams have. The Chicago White Sox aren't going to be able to compete for a long period of time. I mean, it's going to be a couple of years. Garrett Crochet is under contract, I think, for the end of this year through, I think, 2 more years after that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to pull it up right now. Garrett Crochet is under contract until 2027. So if you are the Chicago White Sox, you have to think about that when you're looking at trades. I mean, you could sit there and ask for the world. You could sit there and pretend that Garrett Crochet is Max Scherzer in his prime. You could sit there and pretend that he's part of this deal that could get you a haul that Juan Soto got the Washington Nationals. I mean, you could think that all you want, but at the end of the day, if teams aren't willing to pay for that and they're not willing to give you the prospect capital because they're not that desperate, because they don't think that Garrett Crochet is going to be the person that puts them over the top, then all of a sudden the leverage is going to flip to the buyers because they know that the White Sox have to sell Garrett Crochet. They know keeping him is not part of their cards. They know keeping him does not help them in the future because he doesn't fit the window. By the time Garrett Crochet becomes a free agent in 2027, he'll be 28 years old, and he will cost more money than the Chicago White Sox are willing to spend. So as much as this price tag is super high, there's not a lot of teams that are one player away from winning a World Series, with the exception of maybe Philadelphia. I don't think a lot of these teams are going to just spend accordingly to just get one prize. I mean, look at the Dodgers, right? Everybody wants to talk about the Dodgers. If you just add Garrett Crochet to the Dodgers, that doesn't make them that much better. Look how many guys they have hurt. I mean, their starting rotation that's hurt might be one of the best starting rotations in baseball history that's ever been on an IL together. I mean, they have Kershaw's out, and Bobby Miller's out, and Dustin May's out for the year now, and Tony Gonsolin and Walker Buehler. I mean, they got nothing left. And who knows when those players are coming back or if they're going to be successful when they do come back. But that's a team that needs starting pitching. Join the club of a lot of teams that need starting pitching with the San Diego Padres. The White Sox will try to get as much out of Crochet as possible, but there's not a lot of teams out there that just need Garrett Crochet. They need more. They need more place pieces, and despite the market being a seller's market, I think it's going to be hard pressed to convince one team to go all in on one player and not have the ability to upgrade in other spots. Start looking through the wild cards. Start looking through the division standings. I mean, Milwaukee is leading their division. They have been struggling as of late. And they're a team that's not just one piece away. The Dodgers are not a team that's one piece away. Atlanta, St. Louis, New York, Arizona, San Diego, all of those teams within a couple of games of each other in the wild card, none of those teams are one player away from being over the top. You can look at the Guardians, you can look at the Orioles, the Mariners in the American League, the Yankees. They all need a couple of pieces. They could all use a couple of pieces. They're not all sitting there willing to go after the same one big prospect or one big trade piece. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline, and some executives thinks it might be as boring as ever because a lot of teams aren't going to pull the trigger on some of these deals on these asking prices that the sellers currently have. But I think that's going to come down. We'll have more on that in just a little bit. I'm Braden Surprenant. Thanks again for tuning in to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. If you haven't done it already, follow me on social media. You can follow me on X. You can follow me on Instagram. Follow me on TikTok at B_SURP. You can also follow me on YouTube as well at B_SURP. Subscribe to our YouTube page. That's where you can find us more times than not. Of course, on the 97.3 The Fan page. Give us a like if you haven't done so already. Want to get to your phone calls today as well. How would you evaluate the first half of the Padres season? That's the question of the day. What kind of letter grade are you giving the Padres? 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. When we come back, we'll break down how everybody did really in the first half with one game to go before the ceremonial second half and the All-Star break. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden Surprenant Show live and local each and every Sunday morning. Thanks again for making our morning a part of your morning, whether you're going out to any type of tournament out there, soccer, basketball, off-season, sports. You know, when I was in high school, my bio teacher, which also the defensive coordinator at Cathedral, John Montali, said there's only two sports. There is football, and then there's off-season football. And right now we are in the football season, if you will. As you can tell by all my gear that I'm wearing with Cathedral, I have come into the part now where my wardrobe is basically just red and gold due to the rules of coaching at Cathedral. We have a kind of a kangaroo court kind of deal where you have to wear all Don's apparel or Under Armour apparel at events. And so now with all the time that I have spent and will spend at Cathedral Catholic High School and other events, I'll be wearing mostly this as my wardrobe throughout the next couple of months, aside from when I'm at USD, and then I would get to wear the blue, the navy blue, and the Torero blue. If you haven't done it already, thanks again for all of you watching on YouTube. Give us a like on the YouTube page, and be sure to continue your comments. It helps with the algorithm, helps with putting our show out there, since Twitter has now eliminated us from being able to stream online unless you subscribe or pay for premium, which I'm not going to do. So sorry for all of you that were looking for this on Twitter, if you will. But that being said, I wanted to get into a couple of things. Again, thanks again for making our morning a part of yours. Be sure to follow us on social media at B_SURP, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. You can subscribe to my YouTube page where we have more content. We'll be doing some high school football stuff later on in the year, towards August. We're working on the kinks on that, but we should have something up and running later on before high school football season. I was at Edison High School yesterday for the Battle at the Beach tournament. Don's made the A bracket, which was fun. It's an invite-only tournament, and it's some of the best teams in the state of California. It was good competition for us up there at Edison. Always a great tournament. Ended up losing to St. John Bosco in the quarterfinals of the tournament, but they're one of the best teams in the country every year. Had a good time. I do not follow any of the local Little League scores, Sean J. in the chat, but I knew that yesterday was sectionals. And I knew my Scripps Ranch Little League, in which I'm an alum, and in which I'm a Scripps Ranch Little League All-Star alum as well, was supposed to play yesterday. I don't know what the score was, so maybe somebody can update me on that. Love supporting Scripps Ranch Little League as much as I can. As a former Scripps Ranch Little League player and a former Scripps Ranch Little League All-Star, it's a fun time of year. They're now in sectionals, I think, for the Majors division. They have so many different divisions now than when I played. As the Majors division for everybody in San Diego, I think the four districts are down, or the districts are down to 4 teams in sectionals. The winner of sectionals will go to the SoCal Regional with all the other sections in Southern California, and then the winner of that will go on to play in the West Regional. And if you win the West Regional, you get to go to Little League World Series. So we still have teams alive in San Diego. I'm sure KUSI will have more on that. I wanted to get to one of the comments in the chat because I know this has kind of sparked the topic of conversation throughout the week. As we have a comment here from Andros Last. Braden, has there been any talk about Padres wanting to get any pitching from Cleveland? That seems to be the topic of conversation because last week Cleveland's general manager mentioned that he is willing to trade bullpen pieces for a shortstop. And so naturally, as we often do as fans, we sit there and we go, well, we have a shortstop. We have an abundance of shortstops, and we have one that's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Maybe we can sell Ha-Seong Kim to the Cleveland Guardians for some bullpen help. It's not a bad idea when you think about it from that perspective. But it's a rental piece for Cleveland. And if you look at their roster, and again, you need bullpen help, right? Bullpen help. You know who else needs bullpen help? That would be the Cleveland Guardians, because they're in a playoff spot. They are a team that needs pitching just as much as the Padres need pitching. And even though they have a plethora of bullpen arms, I would like to know which one of their pitchers is somebody that you think you're going to get for Ha-Seong Kim. I'd love to know your answer on this, because people, like, it's funny, like Padres fans right now, some of them, and there's this huge debate on whether or not Ha-Seong Kim is more valuable on your team right now or traded away. And I already said he has no trade value. He has absolutely no trade value. I don't care what his F WAR is. I don't care what his B WAR is. He has no trade value, because the teams that need Ha-Seong Kim are teams that are in competition for a World Series. You know, maybe it's the Yankees to help out since Volpe hasn't been very good. Maybe it's the Guardians, right, who have said they needed a shortstop. You know, maybe it's the Los Angeles Dodgers with Mookie Betts being hurt. I mean, there's some teams out there that need shortstops. But the teams that need shortstops are not going to part ways with anybody that's in their bullpen that is worth anything. Look at the bullpen. I'm going to tell you right now, the guy that they would probably think about sending you their way for Ha-Seong Kim was on the Padres at the beginning of the season. His name is Pedro Avila. Do you want Pedro Avila back? That's who you could probably get for Ha-Seong Kim. And guess what? Pedro Avila's got a save. He's 3-1 with a 4.41 ERA. He's done great with the Guardians. You want him back? That's the type of player you would get back. In 22 appearances with the Guardians, his 2-1 with a 3.51 ERA and 41 innings pitched. Not doing too bad. That's who you would get. Maybe a Pedro Avila. They're not trading away Scott Barlow, who, by the way, you already had on the team last year, who you traded to. You're not going to get Emmanuel Clase, who's their closer. I mean, go through their list of their pitchers. You're not getting these guys. So like I said before, he has no trade value. You're not going to be able to part ways with the pitching or part ways with... You're not going to be able to trade with Cleveland and end up with some of their pitchers, especially the ones that you would like at this point. So take it for what it's worth. I don't really see that working. I do agree with Boogie in the chat. A 3-team trade would probably be where you're at. I also think the only trade value you have with Ha-Seong Kim is if you get a decent prospect back because somebody wants him as a rental, and then you can flip that prospect. The people that say he doesn't have, they disagree on the trade value. I want to know who you think you could get. There's no value, and it has nothing to do with Ha-Seong Kim. He's a rental shortstop that hits 220. He is a utility player. He is a defensive replacement. But the value of Ha-Seong Kim for the Guardians is not something that you're going to get a good pitcher in return. You're going to get some guy like, an Enel De Los Santos on the Padres. I mean, that's the relief help that they're talking about. That's the relief depth they're talking about. They're not talking about one of their better players. I mean, you could go through the stats of the Guardians bullpen and try to find me somebody that you think would be worth them trading away for Ha-Seong Kim. And there isn't a lot of options for them. The bullpen, yeah, exactly. The Dodgers need bullpen help too. There's a lot of teams that need bullpen help. The Padres need pitching, and more pitching, and that's what everybody else in Major League Baseball needs. And as much as and here's the thing with Ha-Seong Kim and the people that want to trade Ha-Seong Kim. The people who want to trade Ha-Seong Kim want him off the team because they don't think he can help the team. And so they're thinking that, so you can't say that he's not good enough to help the Padres, but then he's got this great trade value. It's not possible. You got to reevaluate who you trade with. I think the Guardians, out of all the teams that you could trade Ha-Seong Kim to, I think the Guardians would be the team. But to me, Ha-Seong Kim is better off on the Padres in some sort of capacity than being traded at this point because you missed the time to trade him. Because a 2-month rental of Ha-Seong Kim is not worth a bullpen arm for all these teams. I don't care how good he is defensively. He's just not. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. If you're not on the YouTube chat, jump in and throw some comments in there if you want, asking whether or not you think there's some trade value for Ha-Seong Kim. Also want to know what's going on with the first half grades for the Padres. How do you think the Padres did in the ceremonial first half of the season? We're going to talk more about that when we come back on the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden Surprenant Show live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. We're talking Padres baseball, answering your questions on the YouTube chat. If you want to join in on the conversation via the phone and be on the radio, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Some good comments during the break. We had Boogie on there going, the extra playoff spot is really a curse. Now every team is in it. That's what makes it entertaining. That's what makes it entertaining. Sports are about entertainment. They're not about the sport itself. I mean, it's about trying to entertain you as much as possible. And the added playoff spot is what does that. The other thing, too, is if you think they're done expanding the playoffs, I got news for you. It's going to be a little different than that. It's going to be a little different than that. I mean, they got a new collective bargaining agreement that's expected to happen after the end of the 2026 season, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll be right back into this process that we were before. A lot of people asking about potential trades out there, which is good if you want to continue asking questions on YouTube. Give us a view. Jump on YouTube at B_SURP. You can find us there. You can subscribe to my YouTube page at BSurp. You can also find us on 97 Through the Fans page as well at 97 Through the Fan SD. And we could be part of the conversation. Follow me on all social media accounts as well at B_SURP. I wanted to talk about, some of the first half grades that usually comes around this time of the year. Kind of very traditional radio bit in sports radio. How did everybody do in the first half? I could go through the Major League Baseball teams here in just a second. But we'll talk about some of the grades that have been handed out ahead of the San Diego Padres. Padres not the best in class, but not the worst in class either. Philadelphia Phillies got an A. Not surprised. I'd give them an A. They've been the best team in baseball all season. They've been red hot all season, and I think it's going to take a lot for them to cool off. And I think they don't have a lot of holes on that roster. I mean, the only thing that's going to slow them down is the crapshoot that is the playoffs, because you never know what's going to happen in the postseason of Major League Baseball. It's what Sarah said. You have to play like 700 and something games or whatever it is. A best of 170 game. I don't know, whatever he said. It was something ridiculous. In order to find the one real true champion of Major League Baseball. Phillies got an A. Orioles got an A. Not surprised. Guardians got an A. I mean, Guardians have just been above and beyond better than expected with their players and their small payroll. I mean, if you look at the Guardians roster, it's really remarkable how they're able to do what they do. But they've spent under $100 million this year on payroll. Under $100 million this year on payroll. I mean, the Padres are giving $100 million to like 3 players. The Guardians continue to win with a small budget. Their highest paid player is Jose Ramirez, as he should be. He is the best player on that team. And then nobody else makes more than $12 million. I mean, Shane Bieber makes $13 million. Everybody else is making less. Scott Barlow, 6.7. Josh Naylor, 6.5. James Karinchak, 1.9. Tristan McKenzie, 1.6. Sam Hentage, 1.1. Nick Sandlin, 1. Carlos Carrasco's getting 2. I mean, Austin Hedges is like their 6th highest paid player at $4 million. Ridiculous. Everybody else is making league minimum. Definitely an A for the Cleveland Guardians. Milwaukee Brewers get an A. I'm really surprised by the Brewers. I thought with the way that the Cubs added during the offseason, not only with their manager, but also some other pieces, with bringing back Cody Bellinger, with that division not being very good on paper, I thought for sure the Cardinals would be winning that division, and they've started to make a little bit of a comeback. But the Brewers have been one of the biggest surprises, I think, in Major League Baseball this year, with Pat Murphy at the helm, right, and not having a lot of their guys back, and not spending a lot of money, and losing their best bullpen piece before the season starts. I mean, it's remarkable how good the Brewers have been. They only have a 3.5 game lead on the Cardinals now, and they're 3-7 in their last 10. But the Brewers have been a major surprise this season. They got an A as well. Kansas City, A-. I love what Kansas City did during the offseason and bringing in Seth Lugo from, as a free agent and putting together a really good team. They got good young players in Bobby Witt Jr. They got some big contributors in Salvador Perez and Vinny Pasquantino. They've been really good. I mean, recently it's been rough for the Royals because they've kind of fallen off a little bit, but they got out to a great start to the year, and they spent some money. They improved their pitching. They get an A-, according to ESPN.com. Dodgers are the B+. I think they've been a little disappointing compared to what they were expected to be, right? I mean, they got swept by the best team in the National League, but they're still doing very well. With the considerations of the injuries that they have had, B+, I think is fine. New York Yankees, B+, I think is fine. I think they're coming back down to earth, though. A little bit. They might have a disappointing second half. Red Sox are the B+. I think that's fair. The pretty good season this year. They weren't expected to be one of those top teams in the American League East. I think they were expected to come in last in the East, with the Rays always being good, not really doing that this year, with the Blue Jays, and their star-studded roster. They're expected to be a lot better. But the Red Sox are right there in the conversation, 4.5 games out of first place in the American League East. The last team that has a better grade than the San Diego Padres would be the Minnesota Twins. Twins are 0-14 against the Yankees, Guardians, and Orioles, but they've played well against everyone else to put themselves in a good position. They have to beat Cleveland in head-to-head action, but the AL Central could turn into a fight down the stretch, even though the Guardians have put together such a gigantic lead. Twins get a B. They got the Padres at a B-. I think it's pretty fair. I would probably give them a B on the season. I mean, with every piece that they departed with during the offseason, for them to be better at this point than they were a year ago, I think is remarkable. I mean, you could say what you want about some of these players that have now left, but when you lose your closer and when you lose your, one of your superstar players in Juan Soto, and you lose a Cy Young award-winning pitcher in Blake Snell, you're not expected to be any better than you were the year prior. And they are better. They play better. They play harder than they did last year. That's at least what it looks like to the fans. And when you had question marks in Jackson Merrill and Jurickson Profar, you're going to replace Juan Soto with Jackson Merrill and Jurickson Profar? Yeah, we are. They have been major godsends to the Padres. All of the weaknesses of the Padres and the question marks going into the season have been their major assets. But they don't get an A because all of their assets that was expected to be the carriers of the team have all kind of been disappointing. If you go through it, we got a couple of minutes. I mean, if you go through the first half grades for the San Diego Padres based on position, based on position and group, if you will. It kind of balances out to around a B-. I mean, let's start with the starting pitching. I think the starting pitching has been it's been okay. It's been solid, and I think the biggest thing has been, guys like Matt Waldron have been able to pick up the slack when guys like Dylan Cease have not been good, but when Dylan Cease has been good, they have been really good. And Dylan Cease yesterday was really good. And if you could get more of that Dylan Cease in the second half, that is a major upgrade to that rotation that was really struggling for a period of time. I think the back end of that rotation is a big reason why it gets a higher grade. Losing Darvish and Musgrove and not having that consistent starting pitching, I would probably give their starting pitching a B- to a C+ to a B-. I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic. I'll go B- on the starting pitching. Their bullpen, I think their bullpen has been a D for the most part. The bullpen was expected to be probably the Padres' biggest asset this year. And instead, I mean, Robert Suarez is an all-star, and Jeremiah Estrada has been great, but everybody else has been awful. And it's just not been very good in that bridge the gap. I think Adrian Morahone has done a good job, so I'll give him a D+. But I think the failures of the bullpen outweigh a lot of the success of the bullpen, and that's the major area of concern at the trade deadline, I think, for the Padres. Starting pitching and relief pitching. Infield, I think the infield's been pretty solid. I mean, Luis Ariz has been a nice addition for the Padres. I think defensively it hasn't been very good, but I think offensively, I mean, that's your bread and butter on the team has been the infield. I think they've played up to about their expectations, probably just a little bit low, so I'm going to give them a C+ for the infield. I think the outfield's an A. I don't think you could give the outfield anything but an A. If you want to be super unrealistic and go A+, I think you could go A+. I'm not handing out any grades higher than an A. Outfield's an A. I mean, what Jackson Merrill's been able to do, what Jerickson Profar's been able to do, what Fernando Tatis Jr. has been able to do before he got injured. I mean, you have all three of your outfielders, your usual starting outfielders, are all-stars. And two of them are starting, or at least got picked to start. And the other one probably is pretty close to deserving to start if people knew who he was outside of Southern California. A for the outfield. Catching's kind of tough because I think the catching has been kind of up and down. I'd probably give the catching a C, to say the least. I'll give it a C+. I mean, Kyle Higashioka in the last month has really resurrected the catching position. Luis Camposano at the beginning of the year looked pretty decent, but since then has not been very good. I'd probably give them a C+. So overall, I mean, starting pitching a B-, relief pitching a D+, infield a C+, outfield an A, catching a C+. Overall, I don't know if that even gives you a B- grade point average, but I think the Padres' first half is a B-. I think there's a lot of areas to improve on if you're the Padres. I think there's a lot of holes that the Padres need to fill. I don't think all the holes are going to be filled. And when we come back, I'm going to get you caught up on everything circling on the rumor mill when it comes to trades around the base pass with Bob Nightingale, because he reported a lot of stuff yesterday that is intriguing to me for the San Diego Padres. And one of them being, is A.J. Preller's job on the line if they don't make the playoffs? That's interesting to me. I mean, I think at the beginning of the season that was part of the conversation. I think it's easy to say if you don't make the playoffs in the National League, you're probably going to be under 500. I don't think there's a scenario right now with the way the National League is playing that, you win 90 games and you don't make the playoffs. I don't think it's going to take a lot of wins to make the playoffs in the National League. I think it's going to be around 80-something games. I don't think this year is the year, but eventually in Major League Baseball with the expanded playoff and being able to play everybody in Major League Baseball, I would not be surprised if you get a playoff team at 80-82 or 79-83 in the future. I don't think that's this year, but that could be something coming up in the Padres, not the Padres future, but in the National League wildcard future. So we thought going into the season it was going to be A.J. Preller's going to need a good year if he wants to keep his job. I mean, I think it's got to be make the playoffs. And Bob Nightingale put that in his around the base paths. It said, and quote directly from the article, baseball executives are starting to believe that Blue Jays general manager Ross Atkins, Padres general manager A.J. Preller, and Farhan Zaidi, Giants president of baseball operations, all may have to make the playoffs to assure they keep their jobs. Atkins appears to be in the most danger. We're going to talk about that when we come back. I'll get you some other news and notes there, including a former Padre that is available at the deadline whose current team is willing to pay his entire salary to go away. Plus, what did the Padres offer, and why was it quickly denied? We'll talk about that when we come back. Braden Surprenant Show, live and local, each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Hour number 2 of the Braden Surprenant Show on the final hour as we'll kick off the day before Padres baseball coming up at 1:10, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. 1:10 p.m. Pacific time. Pregame show, Eco Water SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt will be on at 12:10 p.m. Pacific time as we get you ready for Padres and Braves final game of the first half of the season, ceremonial first half of the season. Padres already blew past the first half of the season game-wise, playing game number 98 today. Correction, 99. Playing game number 99 today against the Atlanta Braves. Padres have won the season series against Atlanta. As things sit right now, the Padres are 50-48 on the year, which puts them one game behind New York Mets in the NL wildcard standings, tied with the Arizona Diamondbacks, a game and a half behind the Cardinals in the second spot, and now 4 games behind Atlanta for the top wildcard spot in the wildcard standings. The unfortunate thing for the San Diego Padres is the Padres decided to have a clunker of a week the same week that the Dodgers had a clunker of a week. Dodgers have won 3 of their last 10 games. They've lost 7 of 10 in their last 10. They lost again yesterday on an absolute embarrassing loss to the Tigers on a big comeback. They got swept by Philadelphia. And if the Padres just win a couple of games there, they're probably like 4 games back out of a division spot. Instead, they're still at 7. Now tied with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who have just gotten a new spark of life over the last couple of weeks after taking 2 out of 3 from LA, taking 2 out of 3 from San Diego, doing the same thing against Atlanta. I think they split the 4-game series against the Braves and have now won 4 in a row. So now the Padres are tied with Arizona in the standings and have a 3-game lead on the Giants in the standings. Terrible time to have their 5-game losing streak for a second time during a Dodger slump, as Boogie points out in the chat. Thanks again for making our morning a part of yours. I'm Braden Surprenant. Be sure to give us a like on YouTube. Give us a subscribe on YouTube as well, either at 97 through the fan, or you can subscribe on my YouTube page as well at B_SURP. Answering your questions in the chat. Also take your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Padres baseball later on today at 1:10. Eco Water SoCal Padres pregame show will get underway at 12:10 with Sam Levitt. Got a lot to report on when it comes to the trade deadline. Most notably, what Bob Nightingale has put into his USA Today article of the weekend. He spent a lot of time on the draft. I don't want to spend too much time on the draft. I saw one comment in the chat. I think it's from Boogie. Bigger question, will Preller draft in their shortstop? He might. Who cares? I mean, the draft doesn't do it for me. You know, Major League Baseball tries very hard. They try very hard to make themselves like the National Football League. And they're like 10 years behind the NFL, if not more, on most of the decisions they decide to make. Whether it be the draft combine, whether it be the draft, whether it be, you know, the way they do the All-Star game. I mean, there's so many things that Major League Baseball has copied from the National Football League that it doesn't fit the National Football League. It just doesn't. And there's things that work in the NFL that will never work in Major League Baseball, yet here we are trying to hype up the draft. I mean, they moved the draft to the All-Star break, which I don't necessarily know if that's a bad idea. Again, everything is about marketing and entertainment. You know, traditional people in baseball hate it. You know, college baseball coaches hate it because they don't know if they're going to get guys back or not, and everybody's kind of waiting around to see if their players are going to get drafted. Scouts don't like it. I mean, it sounds like it's not necessarily conducive for Major League Baseball. I mean, before they were doing the draft in the middle of the College World Series, which was kind of ridiculous. But they moved the draft, and now they try to make it like this big spectacle. Like, we're going to see these players within the next 5 or 6 years. And actually, to be honest with you, it's moved up. I mean, they continue to move players up the ladder very quickly now. But, you know, I don't, the draft doesn't do anything for me in Major League Baseball. The draft doesn't really do anything for me in any sport besides the NFL. So today's draft, I mean, who do you think the Padres are going to get? I don't know. I don't care. I don't care. Maybe it's a shortstop. If you draft a shortstop, you say they're drafting an athlete. You draft pitchers all you want. But it doesn't mean, one, they're going to pan out. It doesn't mean they're going to ever play for the Padres. It's the same thing as like recruiting, right? Like for me, like college recruiting is as a fan, who cares? And people don't want to say that because they don't want to like have guys like not choose their team because the fans don't care because you got to kiss a bunch of 18-year-olds' asses. But the reality is, I mean, I look at the recruiting rankings for 2025, and I'm involved with the recruiting because, you know, I'm a high school football coach, so I kind of understand what's going on. Like the front page of 24/7 Sports was recruiting buzz for the 2024 Edison Battle at the Beach 7-on-7 Invitational, which we played in yesterday. I mean, there were some kids. I mean, we got some kids on our team that torched a guy that's got 4 stars that's got 30 offers. It's just, it doesn't matter. But I look at the team rankings, right? I'm a TCU Horned Frog alum. I worked for the football team. I'm a big TCU football fan. And when the Chargers left while I was in college, I mean, TCU has basically filled the void for me in being my NFL team. TCU right now has the number 1 recruiting class for the class of 2025 in the Big 12. They have a top 15 recruiting class in all of college football for the class of 2025. They've dropped down to 20 now because they've had other commits go and guys have changed stars and all that other stuff. I don't care. It means nothing to me. TCU having 4 4-star recruits and 17 3-star recruits in a day and age where they could decommit whenever they want, where they can transfer after they sign a letter of intent, where they could like not get playing time one game and then enter the transfer portal during a season. I don't care. I'm beyond blessed to receive an offer. Who cares? It's so overplayed now. Oh, I got 20 offers. I don't care. Like itching for like fans to just like immerse themselves into you and give you all this praise because you got an offer from their favorite school. You don't need these guys to compete. And here's the thing, you're evaluating 18-year-olds. We've talked with 24/7 Sports recruiting people all the time. I think Greg Biggins is the guy that does arguably some of the best work in Southern California. We've had him on the shows before. I've talked to him personally. But he says when it comes to recruiting stars, it's what they think. Again, what the people at 24/7 Sports thinks, that individual kid who is not fully developed yet, who is between the ages of 15 or really 14 to 18, what they think that player is going to be in the National Football League. It means nothing. They're children. You don't know when they're going to develop, and everybody develops at different times. So TCU could have 4 4-star recruits committed to their team. That doesn't mean, 1, they're going to be studs, 2, they're going to stay committed, or 3, that they end up staying for longer than a year anyway. I mean, they could go show up to camp, not be very good, within 2 weeks go, I'm not going to do this, and bail. The same thing is with Major League Baseball's draft. I don't care. It means nothing to me. You could get excited about these players all you want, especially if you're a fan of a team that has a general manager like A.J. Preller. Who cares? That player might be traded for somebody else anyway. If you're interested in the draft or interested from a Padres fan perspective, don't worry about the names. Just worry about how much hype they got, because the Padres could probably flip that player into a stud that's already been proven at the major league level. Look for the recruiting rankings just like you look at the farm system rankings. I mean, who cares? When TCU won the Peach Bowl, they had a Mountain West recruiting class, and they were arguably one of the best teams in college football at the time, and they should have made the playoff. The recruiting class that they had when they made the national championship wasn't one of the best recruiting classes. If you want to look at why recruiting classes don't matter and why farm system rankings don't matter, look at Texas A&M. A&M's had like one of the best recruiting classes every year. They don't do anything with it because it's all BS. It means nothing. Right now, when you're doing all these 7-on-7 camps and everything, and you're part of this, you start seeing everybody getting these offers. It means nothing to me. And it should mean nothing to any fan. Oh, great. TCU's got 21 commits. Their rating's at 219. They're top 20 in the country in 2025. Until the dude puts a frog sticker on the side of his helmet and it runs out on the field, I don't care. The same thing applies with the MLB draft. Until the guy puts on the brown and gold and is introduced by Alex Miniak, I don't care. It means nothing. You can talk about development all your time. Oh, this guy's going to be a good prospect. Oh, this guy's great. Until he proves it at the major league level, you're kidding yourself if you think it's going to be something spectacular. That's still a risk with some of the players that the Padres have signed, with an Ethan Salas or Leonis DeVries. So I went on a little bit of a diatribe there on recruiting and the draft. The draft doesn't do it for me. The only sport where the draft makes sense is the National Football League and the first 10 picks in the NBA. Because those players are on your team immediately in some sort of aspect. And they're under contract immediately in some sort of aspect. But the draft today, are we worried about the Padres draft? Who cares? If they draft another shortstop, great. They could draft a stud shortstop. And then they could. What if he's better than DeVries? I mean, it's there's so many can of worms you open up with I wonder what they draft. Don't worry about the position. Draft the best available player. If you're interested in watching the draft, hopefully the Padres draft the best available player at the time. I mean, that's basically what you're going for. Other things around the base pass, according to Bob Nightingale. Miami Marlins have been hoping they could trade center fielder Jazz Chisholm all season, with the Seattle Mariners emerging as the favorites to land him. Kansas City Royals have also expressed interest in Chisholm, but the Philadelphia Phillies have zero interest in Jazz Chisholm. I don't know why that was thrown in there. Are we going to ask the Phillies if they're interested on every player? What do you think about Jazz Chisholm? Nah, we're good. Jazz Chisholm's a good player, good center fielder. A little bit of a problem in the clubhouse sometimes, but overall, we'll see if any contender wants to trade for Jazz Chisholm. It sounds like the Marlins are going to scrub that team to nothing. The other Marlins thing that I thought was interesting, it goes later on in the list here. I mean, they already got rid of Luis Arraez. They're trying to shop Jazz Chisholm. And, those two players probably fit their team and their future more than this next one. But the Miami Marlins are trying to part ways with Josh Bell. And in trying to part ways with Josh Bell, the Marlins, if I can find it on the sheet, because I want to get it word for word exactly what Bob Nightingale reported, they are willing to eat virtually the entirety of first baseman Josh Bell's $16 million contract for fringe prospects. Fringe prospects. I find that very intriguing. I thought Josh Bell was a good player here in San Diego. If you're going to get him for free, I think it's a lot different of a conversation. I think you could go with the where is he going to play attitude. I also don't necessarily know he's having that great of a year. But the fact that the Marlins are willing, I don't think the significance is Josh Bell. I think the significance of this is the fact that the Marlins were willing to pay I think almost the entirety of the contract of Luis Arraez to ship him off for not a lot of big prospects that the Padres traded back to them. The fact that they're willing to spend $16 million to get rid of Josh Bell. what they're obviously trying to just part ways with anybody that's still attached to this team. I mean, Josh Bell right now has an OPS plus of 80. I mean, he has been so bad. 230 average, 651 OPS. I mean, 9 home runs, 39 RBIs. I like Josh Bell in reality. I mean, if Josh Bell's free, why not? But that's, I mean, I don't want to, what's a fringe prospect to them? That's another big question. But they're open for business. I mean, anything that's not tied down to the ship, the Marlins are parting ways with, based on what I'm reading from Bob Nightingale. We got some other things on there as well. I mean, they're talking about the Padres. They're like, oh, could you imagine what the Padres would be today if they just held on to their minor league prospects in recent years? I mean, if they held on to everybody, which nobody ever does. They traded Trey Turner, Max Fried, Emmanuel Clase, Josh Naylor, Andres Munoz, Ty France, Matt Strahm, Brent Rooker, James Wood, C.J. Abrams, and Mackenzie Gore, among others. Really good players. Are those players better than the current players you have? I don't know about that. I mean, it's always hindsight 2020. You don't know how things would have played out. A couple other things that popped up on this deal. Padres recently made an offer for White Sox ace Garrett Crochet, but was quickly dismissed. I know the White Sox are probably trying to get everything possible in return for Crochet because that's their biggest piece to trade with right now. Rival GMs are uncertain now whether Crochet will be dealt, but the White Sox still fully intend to move him. What that is telling me is the White Sox have set such a high price on Garrett Crochet because they try to get as much out of it as possible that teams are now like, all right, I'm not going to waste my time talking with them. So we'll see if the White Sox overplay their hand. The other thing that they're talking about, the White Sox were uncertain that often injured center fielder Luis Robert would have high enough trade value to move, are now cautiously optimistic they can trade him. They're still open to moving anyone and everyone, believing that starter Eric Fetty should bring in a nice return too. The only way that I'm making a deal with the White Sox is if I get multiple pieces back for my potential top 30 prospects. Again, I would never trade Salas or DeVries at this point. General managers are openly wondering whether this could be rather a dull trade season. There could be plenty of names, but not a real impact player on this year's playoff races now that the Mets, Cubs, Rangers suddenly are playing better and may not sell. I think from that perspective, and this will be the final thing I talk about before we go to break, I think from that perspective, there's not going to be a major blockbuster trade because there's not a major blockbuster player that is available. I think with the way that the league is right now, and as Boogie mentioned earlier, with everybody kind of being in it, I think a lot of small pieces get dealt, and I think a lot of teams end up making moves. This could be one of those deals where I don't want to say it's going to be like the NBA trade deadline, as fast-paced and insane that is, but I feel like it could have the workings of an NBA-type trade deadline where just a bunch of names are flying off the board and teams are changing rosters quickly. You know, you're not going to get the big Juan Soto deal that kind of headlines all the other deals throughout Major League Baseball. You're not going to get that, big pitching deal at the deadline. But you're going to get some of these small pieces out there. The White Sox want to trade almost everything on their roster, everybody on their roster. I mean, they're not going to send all those players in one deal. They have Crochet, they have Robert, they have Fetty, they have Tommy Pham that they can all part ways with. They have additional pieces in their bullpen. They have Kopech they can trade. They got Andrew Vaughn they can trade. I mean, they have all of these players that are under the age of 30 that they could send elsewhere and just go full rebuild mode. Paul DeYoung has had a good year this year for the White Sox. They could get rid of him. Just so many pieces that they could part ways with. Other things for you. Here's one that's interesting just for today's game. So Atlanta is pitching Chris Sale today for the Padres. That is significant because the Padres have to deal with Chris Sale today, obviously. Chris Sale, according to National League manager Torey Lovullo, it says if Atlanta's Chris Sale were not starting Sunday, making him ineligible to pitch in the All-Star game, he may have been their choice to start for the National League, Diamondbacks coaches say. Yet it's likely Major League Baseball would have overruled manager Torey Lovullo and made Skeens the starter anyway. Skeens is going to be the starter even before his 7 no-hit innings in his last start Wednesday against the Brewers. It proves that it's all about entertainment, which is fine. I think that's what Major League Baseball should be about anyway. But that's how good Chris Sale has been in Atlanta. I mean, does Atlanta ever miss? I know I'm sure they've had, but do they ever miss? They have to have some of the best scouts in Major League Baseball. I mean, they have made Chris Sale back into vintage Chris Sale. $16 million this year. I mean, they're getting a Cy Young level pitcher in Chris Sale. And we'll see what he does today. Hopefully the Padres rock him. But he has been almost unhittable this year. To the point he could have been the National League starter in the All-Star game. That's wild. That is wild. Cubs have expressed interest in Danny Jansen of the Blue Jays. Blue Jays might be selling off a lot of pieces. That being said, sounds like their general manager's on the hot seat, so I don't know how that's going to work. Last thing for you that involved the San Diego Padres. Can you spare a starter? Dodgers, Cardinals, Orioles, Padres, Brewers, Astros, and Braves are all seeking at least one or more starter for the stretch run. There's not a lot of starters to go around for that. That's going to make this thing even more difficult to navigate. Giants might be interested in selling closer Camilo Doval. Teams would love to have Tigers starter Jack Flaherty. Also remember his struggles after being traded at the deadline last year. And the Rockies are making Elias Diaz and starting pitchers Austin Gomber and Cal Quantrill available at the deadline. Infielder Ryan McMahon is staying put, according to the Rockies. Trading with the Rockies wouldn't be that bad of an idea. Cal Quantrill is a serviceable pitcher. Austin Gomber is a serviceable pitcher. Elias Diaz can help with the catching situation for the Padres. I don't think it's going to cost a lot of prospect capital to acquire those players. I don't think that's a bad idea. Gomber's making $3.1 million this season. Cal Quantrill $6.5. They're both under control until 2026. Elias Diaz is a rental. He'd be less than $6 million because he's making $6 million this year, and then after the amount of games, by the time you get him, he'd be making about like $2.5 million. It's a lot of interesting direction the Padres can go at the trade deadline, especially with a lot of the news coming out. And we'll see for the next two. That first week after the All-Star break is where teams make or break and decide whether or not they're going to buy or sell. It's going to be interesting to see. We got our first look at what Snapdragon Stadium is going to look like in the new College Football 25 game that gets released tomorrow if you pre-ordered. We're going to show that to you and talk about that. When we come back, I'm Braden Surprenant. Braden Surprenant Show live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden Surprenant Show, 9:30 on a Sunday morning. Talking Padres baseball with you, talking college football with you, whatever you want to talk about. We got it for you right here on the Braden Surprenant Show. Excited about the college football 25 video game coming out tomorrow for everybody that pre-ordered. I am one of those people. It's a game that's been my favorite game for a long period of time, and I could finally put college football 14 to rest. Things been battling for me the last couple of years, but it's good to have college football back on this video game, and before you know it, college football in general will be back. I do want to present, and I'm going to talk about a couple things that, some dynasties I'm going to start, things I like to do on the game for all of those that are interested in that. We did get to see on social media the first look at Snapdragon Stadium on YouTube with San Diego State. It's kind of cool. And here's a little clip from the game that they released that San Diego State put out. A beautiful rendition of the Aztec Stadium. Obviously, it's a little buffered on my thing, and everybody watching on YouTube can watch the vibes of Snapdragon Stadium. This game took like a couple of years to make, and they asked all the schools to put in all their traditions and everything, and the renderings of the stadium and what their field looks like and all this other stuff. So it's a nice little cool look of San Diego State playing against Fresno State on the new video game. I think it's going to be a fun deal. A lot of the players opted into doing this, so they're going to get paid for it. They all get a copy of the game as well. But pretty fun stuff. I'm looking forward to being able to start downloading that tomorrow. In terms of like dynasties and stuff, I always like to put together a dynasty that, it's fun to do. I usually do my own team first. We wish Snapdragon Stadium was that crowded during our home games. If you build it, they will come. You got to build the product. And I think Aztec Fast is going to get people there. But some ideas of teams that you could put together in a dynasty. I'm personally going to have a couple going. I'm going to have a TCU one going. Obviously, it's my team. They're not going to have the mascots on there. Boogie. No more mascot game, which is lame. Playing as the mascots are great. But no, they will not have that. They have the ultimate team instead. I think that's kind of lame. But anyway, so I'm going to have a build my way up as a coach dynasty. I'm going to have my TCU dynasty. And then it's fun with Team Builder. You can put in any team you want. And the last game that was out, almost every high school in San Diego had somebody make them a team and put them into the game, which was kind of fun. So I might do one of those as well. But some schools that you want to do, I'm going to kind of go through this list pretty quickly before I go on to the next segment. Talk more Padres baseball and a great idea for the National Football League in terms of their scheduling. A group of 5 schools you could put on the map and start a dynasty with. The UTEP Miners, Kennesaw State, who's now a D1 school, Kennesaw State Owls, the Kent State Golden Flash, Wyoming Cowboys are always fun to play with, and the Texas State Bobcats, some group of 5 schools to put on the map. Here's some group of 5 schools to elevate to the next level. Tulane, try to get them to a Power 5 conference. West Kentucky, the Hilltoppers, they always put together a pretty good season in college football. Fresno State, San Diego State, play them into a top conference. And James Madison, who recently entered into D1, have been all over the place in Division I athletics. They've been competitive in almost every sport now at the D1 level. Power schools that were left behind you could start as. Maybe you got to get Washington State and Oregon State into a big conference. Go play as the Cougs or the Beavers. Power 5 schools back to relevance. You could play as Miami, get them back to the 90s. BYU, Nebraska, USC, Arkansas. Power 5 schools close to the playoffs. North Carolina, Arizona, Iowa, Tennessee, Penn State, or if you just want to be, play as a favorite. Some underrated favorites, Florida State, Utah, and Penn State. Sports games are fun. The detail they put in this game is ridiculous. In Dynasty mode, I mean, you're sliding into recruits' DMs on a video game. That is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. I don't know how much of that I'm going to be doing, but excited. That game gets released tomorrow for all the pre-orders and then officially released on July 19th. Look forward to that. Anybody that wants to play, potentially hit me up in the chat. We could get on with that. Anybody play OTL yesterday? I missed out on OTL. I know OTL was going on at Fiesta Island. So if you played OTL, chime in on the chat. How did everybody do out there? And shout out to everybody that's out there playing OTL right now at Fiesta Island, or people driving down to the island to hang out on another day. Sunday. I think the glove division is today for everybody that's playing in the glove division. Second weekend of OTL and On Back will be next weekend for everybody that made it through yesterday. Shout out to all of you down there at On Back's OTL this weekend. And if you're in the area, that's why there's a lot of traffic going on down at Fiesta Island. One more segment left. Did Joe Burrow come up with the greatest NFL schedule idea, plus more of your conversations with Padres baseball? Coming up next on the Braden Surprenant Show on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Final segment of the Braden Surprenant Show. Live and local each and every Sunday morning, talking Padres baseball with you, talking a lot of things on the sports world. Talked about NCAA 25, comes out tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Already got it scheduled to download to my account, and we'll see what that game's all about. I'll be playing that all week this week. Last week of camp for high school football, which is great. Don't have to worry about that. You got 2 weeks off of that, and we'll be dialed in ready for the season to start on the first day of practice on August 1st. So I'll have a couple of weeks off there mixed in, and then it's a go time, at least in my world, with USD Athletics, with Cathedral Catholic Athletics, with the show still, Padres baseball, college football. It is a fun time of year. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. As I mentioned, be sure to give us a follow on social media at @B_SURP. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on TikTok. You can also follow me and subscribe on our YouTube page at B_SURP. You can subscribe at 97 through the Fan SD on YouTube as well if you're not on there. If you are, feel free to give us a like. Hit the like button. Helps our algorithm to push it forward since Elon Musk has taken all non-premium accounts off Twitter for streaming. So won't be doing that anytime soon with that. But that's his prerogative and what he wants to do, and we'll just stream to other platforms. We also stream on Facebook. I wanted to mention this. This happened last week. I thought it was very interesting, where Joe Burrow was on with Part of My Take, which is a podcast in the Barstool Sports Network. And they asked them about the 18-game NFL regular season schedule on how to make it work, because the NFL, of course, wants as many games as humanly possible. How to make the 18-game NFL regular season schedule work. And Joe Burrow had a couple of things to say on that matter. And Joe Burrow threw out the idea that you would include 2 bye weeks for every team, with the entire league getting a bye week in week 13, and that's where he would hold the Pro Bowl. He thinks this would be a great way to encourage more viewership. And the league expanded to 17 games for the 2021 season and eliminated 1 preseason game. We assume the league eventually goes to 18 games. The preseason will be shortened by 2 games because the money in the is in the regular season. So for the NFL, again, 18-week schedule, get a bye week in week 13 for everybody. Every team gets an additional bye week on top of that. So you play the final 6 games of the season after everybody takes a bye. In week 13, you do the Pro Bowl, you do some 7-on-7 stuff, do all your skill challenges and things like that. And then with doing that, pushes the Super Bowl to the Sunday before President's Day, which would be great because President's Day, most people have off. Wouldn't you want to have the Monday after the Super Bowl off? I would. That would be great. That would be outstanding, as a matter of fact. It's not a bad idea to have it in the middle of the season like everybody else. Baseball's got it in the middle of the season. Basketball's got it in the middle of the season. I know soccer does their deal with an MLS team, and they go and play the team from Liga MX. NHL has it in the middle of the year. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that'd be kind of fun. I think more players would play. I think a lot of players would want a week off during that week, but if you had it in a desirable location, mid-season Pro Bowl, it would be just like the 7-on-7 Pro Bowl that they have now. You'd actually have some of the best players playing in it. Go out there and get some work in. I mean, they do 7-on-7 every day at practice. I don't mind that idea. I think it's nice. I think it's a good place to be. During the break, I stumbled across this online. And I think it's very interesting when it comes to the trades for the San Diego Padres as we kind of reshift gears into Padres baseball. So Fangraphs have updated their top 31 prospects for the San Diego Padres. They do 31. They rank them in order. They're a little bit different than what MLB.com has. Again, this is according to a lot of their F-WAR and their predictions of where they think the players will be and the grade that they would be in the future. And where they're at in their rankings of the top 31. It's already major different because on MLB.com's top 30 prospect list, and everybody's got their own different prospect lists for individuals, whether it be Fangraphs, whether it be Baseball America, whether it be MLB.com. I mean, there's so many different prospect lists. So the top prospects for the Padres, according to MLB.com, is Ethan Salas 1, Robbie Snelling 2, Dylan Lesko 3, DeVries 4, and Adam Mazur 5. As for the Fangraphs, still relatively the same players, just in a different order, although they still have Jackson Merrill as a part of the deal. He's the number one prospect, according to Fangraphs. The one that's interesting to me that really made me pay attention to this is because I knew Homer Bush Jr. was a prospect in the top 10 for the Padres. He's ranked, according to MLB.com, as the 8th best prospect in the Padres system. As for Fangraphs, they rank him as the 23rd best prospect in the Padres system. And with their rating system, they have their estimated time of arrival, which is 2027 for Homer Bush Jr., according to Fangraphs. MLB.com's got 2026. I thought it was also interesting that Leodalis DeVries' estimated time of arrival to the big leagues listed at 2030 for Fangraphs, where MLB.com's got it at 2028. Obviously, there's different ways to evaluate players. But I think this plays into the fact of every organization evaluates players differently, and every organization views what they have in terms of assets differently and are more willing to part ways with certain assets than others. I know from people in the organization that when the Padres decided to trade C.J. Abrams, they did so because they believed Jackson Merrill was going to be better. And so far, Jackson Merrill has been everything that they have hoped him to be as a now center fielder and an all-star in Major League Baseball. I look at some of this list as well, and I start thinking about the trade deadline. And I talked about what it would be for being all in. And I don't think you need to be trading Salas and DeVries as being all in. Salas is the number 2 prospect behind Merrill, so you can consider it number 1, and DeVries is number 3, with Salas being 2. And those ratings that they had given him, it's all based on what the WAR would be in the future as a Major League player. So Fangraphs has given Jackson Merrill a FV, which would be a future value of a 60. The future value that Fangraphs puts together ranks the players based on the 2080 scale that scouts do, and then throws it in with what the role would be and what their projected WAR would be with that scale. It's a very basic term of explaining their rating system for future value. So if you have anything north of 40, you're above average baseball player, a projected above average baseball player. Anything below 40 is below average. Anything at 40 is average. Just to set the deal. Jackson Merrill's a 60 on the list. That is considered an all-star with a 3.4 to 4.9 WAR projected in Major League Baseball. Salas gets the same 60 score. Again, projected all-star, 3.4 to 4.9 WAR in a single season. DeVries is at a 50, which would be an average everyday player, anywhere between 1.6 to a 2.4 WAR in Major League Baseball. Dylan Lesko, as a pitcher, they have a little bit different scale with pitcher WAR, but as a pitcher, Dylan Lesko is ranked the highest pitcher in your organization. He's in high A ball currently, expected time of arrival 2027. We've heard about Dylan Lesko so many different times, being one of the top pitching prospects in the Padres organization. They list Dylan Lesko as a 50, which would be considered a number 4 starter, approximately 4.0 fielding independent pitching, at times worse, but then with lots of innings, expect a 1.8 to a 2.5 WAR. So you're sitting there looking at some of these prospects that are in your organization that would be potentially dealt at the trade deadline. And Fangraphs, who, according to WAR and their rating system that we treat as the law a lot of times, has Dylan Lesko as a potential number 4 starter. Does having one of your top prospects as a potential number 4 starter make him more intriguing for you to trade or to hang on to? I mean, I was willing to trade him anyway, but if he's only going to be a number 4 starter, is that the depth you're looking for? Maybe to save some money. That's a potential reason to keep him. Or are you hanging on to some of these guys because you think they're going to be ace-type pitchers, or they're going to be top 10 in Major League Baseball players, or top 5 overall players? I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I think a lot of the hype comes around these Padres prospects all the time, and I think naturally we just assume that they're all going to be Fernando Tatis Jr., and that's not going to be the case. The Padres currently in their farm system only have 2 projected All-Stars, and this could change with development and everything else. 2 projected All-Stars. One of them has already made the All-Star game, so that's kind of a crapshoot. And the other one's Ethan Salas. 2 everyday starters. 1 in Leo Dallas DeVries, average starter in Major League Baseball is what it says. Above average, actually an average everyday player. And then Dylan Lesko being a number 4 starter in baseball. And then after that, it's 40-plus for most players. Dylan Snelling, 40-plus, expected to be a number 4 or 5 starter. Brandon Valenzuela, a double-A catcher expected to come up next year, is a bench piece or low-end regular platoon player. Adam Mazur, we've seen him. He's just projected to be a number 4 or 5 starter in Major League Baseball. These are some of the players that might be available at the deadline that would be willing to part ways with. Now, does it hurt your depth? It helps. It hurts a little bit. But that's why I've been saying for the last couple of weeks that if you're going to trade for players, you can't trade for rentals. You have to trade for players that are established major leaguers that are under contract for a couple of years. I'm more than willing to part ways with these players in order to get those. Am I willing to part ways with these depth pieces for a rental or a one-year guy? No, I'm not, because that defeats the purpose of the future success of the San Diego Padres. That would be going all in just for this year. And that's where I think the difference is with this team at the trade deadline. I think they could be all in while continuing the future plans of the Padres by acquiring players that are under control for 2 to 3 years. And I think that is way more valuable than being just all in on this year. You could be buyers at the deadline and go and get good pieces and not just be like, we're all in just on this year. It's our best chance to win. You could do that without having to be, you could go in and buy players and get some help for this team without having to make it look like you're just committed to this season. As Jake Waters in the chat said, as we end today's show, welp, at least the Padres will be above 500 at the break. That's a good positive sign for the Padres going into the All-Star break. Hopefully they can take care of business today against Chris Sale. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Padres as they will play game number 99 today. They've played 98 games. Number 99 will be today. Much-needed All-Star break to follow. And we'll have a lot to talk about next week on the Braden Surprenant Show. Live and local each and every Sunday morning. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.